So I get the privilege, beyond knowing them, to introduce them. Reverend Z, I like how they give me the spelling here and the pronunciation. That's good. Reverend Z. Egloff is a cartoonist, a spoken word artist, an award-winning author of the spiritual human blog Life in ZD, a goofball's guide to enlightenment. Their wife, Reverend Dr. Melissa Phillippe, is a singer, songwriter, and teacher with 9 albums of original music in release. Both Melissa and Z hold Masters of Consciousness Studies. Z also holds a Master's in Spiritual Counseling Psychology, and Melissa holds an honorary doctorate for her contributions to the field of New Thought music. Melissa and Z are founders of Oh My God Life, an online and traveling ministry. Their mission is to bring radical joy to the world. And as I shared last night, there are a few people that you run across in your life that you just recognize from somewhere way beyond this planet. You are 2 such people. It is my honor, my privilege, to yield this pulpit to the brilliance of Melissa and Z.
Thank you. Thank you, Reverend Rafe. Thank you so much to Reverend Rafe and to Deborah for having us here this weekend, hosting us. We had a whole bunch of fun yesterday, too, for those of us who were with us. It's great to be back. We love this area. Okay, so I feel your peace and your presence and your power. Except when I don't. Right? There are those times when we're there. We're there with the divine. We're there with that energy. And then there's times when we feel knocked out of it. Whoever knocked us out of it, perhaps it was us. Sometimes harder to get there than others. So what we want to talk about today is building that relationship with Spirit. Sometimes called the I-thou relationship. Building that relationship. So why do we need to do it? How do we do it? What does it look like? That's some of what we want to talk about today. Sound good? Yeah? Good, I'm glad you said yes. All right, so Melissa's going to get us started. Melissa, go.
It would be so very disturbing.
Yeah,
nah,
we'd say like we're going to do it anyway.
Do something else today. Different talk today, please. While we're up here, I want to just give a separate little shout out to Reverend Madeline and Gary for so graciously hosting us in their home with their amazingly beautiful little kitties, which you'll see why we especially love that. So thank you both. So when I was growing up, we went to church all the time. Every Sunday morning, put on your Sunday finest and head on out to church. So I don't know how many of you did that, but the church that I grew up going to every flippin' Sunday was a church that had one view of God, and that was a God that was outside of me. That God was a God that randomly went off his meds, and I mean his meds. It was that God that Z so beautifully described. So when I got to 6th grade, my parents started to realize they needed to take some action for me. They were a little late, but that's okay. They sent me to private school, and that private school was the very church that I had been going to every Sunday morning. So starting in 6th grade, you know, right around the time you start to figure out who you are and what you really think, yeah. So at that age, I started going to church Monday through Friday. Every morning we would go to church before school, before classes. Right? I know. Jill's shaking her head like, oh no. You can see it coming. So I started to notice things about that God they were talking to me about, including that what I was told was this is an all-loving God, and your best friend, Donna Abrahams, is going to go to hell because she's Jewish. Now, I was at the age where I started to think for myself those mornings, and it made me furious. That was my reaction to it. It just made me so angry. There's so many words that come to mind, and I can't say any of them from up here. So you can imagine. I was enraged about this. It just was like, wait, I've been coming here all this time, and now all of a sudden I'm realizing you guys are totally full of it. This does not make sense, what you're saying. Those two things can't go together. I was so enraged, in fact, that now looking back, I can see that I will never know quite how much of that rage, that very specific reaction that I had to that God, led me to the drug addiction that I went to at that age, pretty young. So I became a full-blown drug addict. And I now, looking back, think, oh, yeah, well, I was pretty angry about that. So part of what I did, in addition to the drugs, was I turned away from spirit entirely. I turned away from spirituality, from any sort of relationship, anything about spirit for a long, long time. I just wasn't relating. Now, here's the cool thing. I said this last night, but I do not tire of saying this. July 31st, which is very soon, right? July 31st of this year, I have 30 years clean. And praise God for that. So what happened is I got clean and sober, and like a lot of people who got clean and sober, I found my way pretty quickly to Centers for Spiritual Living and these new thought, metaphysical teachings and philosophy. And then I started hearing about a different God than the one I had grown up with. This God really worked for me. This God, first of all, is everything. Everything. Everything we see, all of what we think of as space between us, God is infinitely present right here. Right here. Everywhere. Going out infinitely forever, right? This is when we pray in Science of Mind, we pray a 5-step prayer. And the first step is that, reminding ourselves of that reality in which we live. There is one thing happening. It is spirit. That's it. That is all that's happening. I liked that God. And the second God I was hearing about in Science of Mind and Centers for Spiritual Living, which were then called religious science. What was it called? Church of Religious Science, right. Was God, the second God was God as me, because it is a logical thing to say, spirit, this infinite power of love, if it's everything, then it's right here too. Because there's no place where it isn't. So this spirit as me, this was yummy for me. This was a big healing for me. Anybody else? Come here, start hearing about that and go, oh, I like that. That's nice. Now, one thing that happened for me for a very, very long time in Centers for Spiritual Living is that I was not hearing about what they call now the third face of God. So there's the face of God as God as I, the God within, right? God as we, which is the allness, the infinite in everything. And then God as you. That God we can have a relationship with, we can talk to and hear from, right? It's a relationship. Now, I wasn't hearing about that God when I first came here, and that really worked for me. Because if I had heard about that God when I first walked in the doors, I might have flipped out and run because, I know about that God. He is not nice. right? So what's yummy about coming back for me? Now, the one time I would hear is Hafiz and Rumi. When you hear readings by Hafiz and Rumi in Centers for Spiritual Living, you hear the you conversation. Otherwise, it's not talked about that much. It's not taught in the classes and such, right? So that really worked for me. But what happened for me is that when I came back to all three, I realized I now have a 3-dimensional relationship with spirit. It's a 3-dimensional, rich, yummy, because what's so cool about this is, yes, there's the prayer of you, infinite, beloved one. And within this teaching, we know that you I am communing with and talking to is also everywhere in me, in between. It's not like you outside of me. It's you outside of me and right here. It's this just delicious, yummy conundrum. And so that's what we're talking about this morning, is re-inviting you to consciously deepen that I-thou relationship with the divine. How this started for me is 10 years ago, I surrendered and finally, after years of kicking and screaming, said yes to spirit and signed up and started ministerial school. I just happened to do that a year before Z, but only because of details, and we graduated together. So we were in school together a lot, and we took this one class in which there was a guided meditation. In this guided meditation, we were invited to, you know, the typical meditation where it's like, go to your comfortable place, right? So I'm on the beach in Hawaii, because, I can be at the beach, but I don't want to be cold. So I'm on the beach in Hawaii, and then spirit is there in this meditation. And we have this experience of being with spirit. And one part of that was asking spirit, what is your name for me to call you? What is my perfect name for you in my relationship with you? And I heard this very loud and clear answer, the all. The all. I also had an experience in that meditation of feeling, in a way I never had, the actual presence of spirit. Not from a mental understanding, but like feeling so completely loved that I was sobbing so hard, I was afraid I was going to disturb Z's meditation. Because I was like, oh, it was so palpable, amazing to feel that. And then to hear that name for spirit, that's my personal name for spirit. And the next morning when I went walking, I started doing what I do when I'm walking, and I do my prayer. I do my 5-step treatment prayer. And this time, I started by directly communicating with spirit. And I said, you are all that is. Oh, my whole being shifted. My heart opened. It was an emotional experience for me in a way that my prayers hadn't really been. And it became this 3-dimensional experience of spirit, of love itself. After a while of doing that, I started to feel like the all was a little cumbersome. Every time I wanted to say spirit, I would say the all. You are all that is, the all. It just felt like too much. So one morning I was walking along, I asked spirit, so it's feeling like a little long, your name, So maybe I could shorten it and just take the first letter of each of those and say Ta. But it feels a little like maybe disrespectful, Is it okay if I call you Ta? And I literally, occasionally I have these, I heard this voice just like bellowing laughter. And then, I do not care what you call me. So the thing about this I, thou thing is we are relational beings. We are made to relate. That's how we survive, right? So when we bring this face of spirit into our relationship and we deepen it, then we hear more clearly and we recognize that voice as opposed to our egoic structure voice. We can ask and commune and hear, and it is delicious. So when we develop intimacy with someone, a person, how do we do that? We communicate a lot, and we have time, years with them, right? Time. And you know how you do a workshop and you haven't met someone and you meet them there and you really connect, and at the end of the week you feel like you know them like you've known them for years because you've spent this condensed time with them. So it doesn't have to be over a long period of time, but it's about time and communication and communion. So this is what we're inviting you to do, is to spend the time with spirit, consciously communing and deepening that. And there's a few specific things, like I highly recommend asking spirit, what is its name for you to call it? There's got to be a more smooth way of saying that, but you know what I'm talking about. What is my perfect name for you? And then over time, because this is what happens with intimacy, there might be a nickname. Like for me, Ta. I just say Ta, and I feel this feeling. It's one of my favorite meditations to just say Ta. Ta. And I'm feeling that infinite everywhere and right here, and Ta. It's beautiful. So you can cultivate this intimacy, which deepens that connection. First of all, by setting your intention. Of course, that's always first, right? Before you do anything new. And then asking for your name for spirit, your nickname. And then, here's the thing. We pray for everything, all of us, right? We pray for better relationships, greater health. We pray for money. We pray for whatever. We pray all the time for things, right? So this is something that Z and I realized at one point was something we hadn't been praying for, that we pray for now, that kind of covers all the territory. And we highly recommend this prayer, where you ask Spirit to deepen your walk with it. You ask it to deepen your relationship with it. You ask it to speak more clearly to and through you. To deepen. You bring it into that process, because here's the really groovy, cool thing. When we have that, everything else works better. Everything is better. Oh, God, I just heard with blue bonnet on it. Did anybody else hear that? Woo, boy, programming. Everything's better with spirit on it. So that's what we recommend. So to talk more about that relationship and that development of that and a little bit of a story about our lives, here is my beloved wife, Z.
Thank you, baby. I love the I-thou relationship. It's just been such an amazing thing for me, especially over these past few years, to really cultivate that more. There's a few things I love. I love having a deeper relationship with my intuition, right? Knowing what to say and not say, do and not do in any moment. And I also, more and more, as I go through this journey, I get messages from Spirit. I call them downloads. I get these downloads from Spirit. And sometimes they come in the form of metaphors. It's very biblical. It's like I get these stories, and then I have to figure, what's that about, When Melissa and I were about to graduate from ministerial school, I got this particular download, this particular metaphor, that was totally life-changing for us. It just changed everything. And in order for that to make sense, I need to tell you a story about a cat. All right. 2 decades ago now, I was getting out of a pretty painful breakup, and I decided that what I needed to fix everything was I needed a cat. Because here I was, suddenly single all by myself, so I'm like, I need a new cat, that's what I need. Now, at this point in my life, every other cat that I'd had several, had just come to me. You know how cats do that? They pick you. So, they showed up at my place of work or just literally showed up at the back door, or a friend says, hey, do you want a cat, right? Well, I kept waiting for that to happen because I knew I needed this cat to fix everything, but it wasn't happening. So finally, I took matters in my own hands, and I went up to the local animal shelter. They had a big room with all the cats in it, the cat room. And I found this beautiful little kitty. She was so cute, and I said, that's the one I want. And the staff there said, well, she's already taken, but here's another cat who looks a lot like her, a little tortoiseshell. So I go over and I pick up this kitty and I pet her for about 30 seconds until she bites me. So I put her down and I said, I'll take her. That's the one I want, because, I wanted to get my kitty, yeah. It was not easy to go home with her either. So they had 2 references. I had to give them 2 references whom they had to call. They had to call and actually talk to them before they would let me leave. Then I had to sign my name, basically in blood, saying, I will not return this animal to you, and I won't even give her away to anybody else. Serious hoops I had to go through to get this cat. But, like I said, I really wanted this kitty. It was going to solve all my problems, so I did it. I went through all the hoops, brought the kitty home, named her Lucy. A week after that, a friend of mine calls me and says, hey, I know you're looking for a cat. I found this perfect cat for you. And too late. But I couldn't help. I had to go check. So I go to this pet store, and there's this kitty. It was love at first sight. It was a little orange, tabby, male little guy. And he didn't bite. He was great. He was wonderful. And it was super easy to take. They're like, take him, yeah, see ya. So I got him too. Bring him home. I name him Max. Just one problem. Max and Lucy do not get along, not at all. And I'm in this kind of small space, and I'm already a little emotionally tender, right? And it's just not happening. These two, no. And I'm taking them both to this vet, and the vet says, tortoiseshells, sometimes they make better only children, right? And in this case, that's what you got going on. Lucy's a tortoiseshell. I can't return Lucy. I've signed my name in blood that I will not return this cat. So it broke my heart, but I gave Max away to a friend of mine. Oh, it was so hard, yeah. All right, so now it's just me and Lucy. And when she had a tendency to bite, kind of surprising, yeah, and totally out of the blue. I mean, I got better at reading the signs, but still, sometimes just out of nowhere, she'd bite, and it was difficult, and she was tough. A friend of mine once said she looked like she'd spent time in the pokey. She just kind of had this Lucy had been around, She was a tough little broad. Yeah. So 13 years go by. 13 years later, Melissa and I are about to graduate from ministerial school, and I get this download. And the download says, all right, you two are about to start ministerial school. You can approach your ministry in one of 2 ways. You can approach your ministry like you did Lucy, going out and making it happen on your timing. And if you do, you'll love it, just like I did love Lucy, just like the TV show. But if you do that approach, it's also going to kind of bite from time to time. Yeah. Or you can approach your ministry like you did every other cat before Lucy, which is allowing it to happen on Spirit's timing, right? Now, this was fascinating to me because at this point, I had never actually put that together, that Lucy was the one cat that I'd really pushed through really kind of tried to have to make it happen. I'd never actually even thought oh yeah, that was the one that was the hardest to make happen, and it was the most difficult pet relationship I'd ever had, right? So it was that's interesting. Then, a few months later, Lucy dies. Suddenly and unexpectedly. She was 13, And Melissa and I are upstairs, and we hear something going on downstairs. She's having a seizure, and we're thinking, okay, but I take her to the vet, and then boom, she's gone. Which was, I gotta say, so like Lucy, because it's like suddenly, unexpectedly, she's just like, I'm out of here, peace out, like, see you later, you know? She did it her way, right? Okay, so here we are, we're about to start our ministry. We've been given very strict instructions from Spirit of what to do, and now we have like a death in the picture, so yeah, we got told. We're like, all right, now did we listen? Well, yeah. So we're told not to push, okay? Well, so here's the thing. We're creatives, so we know we're going to be home, we're going to be creating music, cartoons, art, all that. That actually feels all very in the flow, right? Yeah. But then the whole going out, the traveling part of our ministry, right? So we're online and traveling, so the going out and going to places, speaking, all that. We got a little freaked out about wanting that to get going, so we made a few calls, and by we, I mean Melissa. Melissa gets on the phone. Hi, this is Melissa Phillippe. I used to travel around the country doing music. Hi, yes, good to talk to you again. Yes, I'm doing well. Yes, thank you. Well, I'm a minister now. Thank you. Yeah, thanks, yeah. I'm a minister now, and now I'm doing ministry with my wife. I know, it surprised me too. Yeah, I know, yeah. My wife's name is Z. Yeah, just the letter Z. Yeah, I know it is a little different, yeah. So they do ministry with me. Oh, they. So Z is gender rich, and so uses they as a pronoun. No, there's just one Z. No, there's just one. Just one. It's the singular they. It's a thing that, yeah. Anyway, so as I was saying, we're going around now and we're doing talk and music at various centers, and one of the things we do with our music, it's a new thing that we've developed. So I do music, and Z does spoken word. Hello? Hello? Yeah, it didn't go that well. Trying to push, it wasn't really happening anyway. But we kept trying. Finally, it was 2 years in that we just said, okay, Spirit, we're ministers, perhaps we should surrender to Spirit, right? Yeah. Okay. And interestingly enough, slowly but surely, we started to get more and more, without doing anything, more and more invitations to go more and more places, including things that we had decided, right, that we didn't do. We're like, well, we don't really like retreats. We're not going to do retreats anymore. And then we got invited to this one retreat, and we're like, okay, we're following, right? And we realized we love doing retreats. How about that? Huh. And then we also got to watch the way everything was just so beautifully orchestrated to go together, the online stuff and the traveling, and it was just so amazing, right, when we took our hands off, how Spirit had this amazing plan in mind. And people would say, wow, your marketing plan, like what you guys are doing, it's just so smart. And we'd say, I know, right? Like, Spirit is so much smarter than we are, right? It's like, yeah. The other thing was, you know how they give that metaphor sometimes, like faith? Following Spirit is like, all you can see is the headlights in front of you, right? And you just have to take that. You just have your vehicle and you're moving along and you can just see the headlights. Well, for us sometimes, it didn't even feel like the whole headlight. It felt like an inch in front, like that's all we could see, right? And that's scary. That's why we didn't want to surrender. It's scary. It's scary sometimes, especially when you get these messages that you're like, I don't agree with that. I don't want to do that, right? But by finally surrendering, when we finally did that, and honestly, it's a process. We still try to take it back sometimes, so it's not one and done. But by finally doing that, it really deepened that connection. It really deepened that relationship, because when you only got 1 inch in front of you can see, you got to trust Spirit, right? You got to trust. So at around the same time that we were finally like, okay, we surrender. I was visiting my folks in Ohio, and Melissa went downtown, and she ran into a friend, and the friend said, hey, so I've got this cat. who's been living under my house for the last 6 months, doesn't get along with my cats. So, do you guys want a cat? Melissa sends me a picture of this guy. I'm in Ohio, and I said, I think that's our cat. And she said, I know. I think that's our cat. And not only that, when I saw him, the spirit tells me his name is Max. To which, as you can see, I like to argue. I said, no, his name can't be Max. I already had a Max. But the next day, Melissa calls me and she goes, I know this is crazy, but I'm getting that his name is Max. So Max came home to live with us. And not surprisingly, he's the most amazing cat we've ever had. He has us wrapped around his little paw. We love this guy. And when we were putting this talk together, I realized why his name is Max. Because the first Max was like the surrendered version, right? I made Lucy happen, and then this sort of effortless, like, hey, you want a cat? That was Max, right? But I had to give him up. But it's never too late to surrender to Spirit. So Spirit said, here you go. Here you go. Here's another Max. So we have a picture, which you've actually had a little preview of. You've already seen it, but there's our boy. We call him our rubber-nosed prince because his nose looks like rubber. Melissa points out I don't have to explain to you that his nose isn't actually made out of rubber, but there you go. That's our little rubber-nosed prince. And whenever we feel discouraged, he's our mascot now, right? He literally represents for us following Spirit. So whenever we feel like we want to argue, when we're scared, like it's too hard, I don't want to do it, I don't think I can do it, we just look into those eyes. And it's a reminder, surrender is not giving up. Surrender is empowering. It's empowering because the more we surrender to Spirit's vision for our lives, things just get amazing. Life gets more amazing than we could ever imagine, and it doesn't bite, right? Spirit is so much smarter than I am. Say that with me. Spirit is so much smarter than I am. Again, Spirit is so much smarter than I am, and it's never too late to surrender to Spirit. Say that with me. It's never too late to surrender to Spirit. One more time. It's never too late to surrender to Spirit. And so it is.